Welcome, everyone. My name is Jenna Roeske. This is Improving Parent Communication. We are in room 42, and it is 4 o'clock. I think I got all of those things for the recording. It will be miraculous if this isn't dropped or tried to be used as a pointer throughout this presentation. So bear with me. I can make an excuse for everything because I'm pregnant. So I will continue to use that throughout this presentation. So if it doesn't go well today, well, I'm pregnant. So I thank you all so much for being here, for choosing this sectional, for coming to any sectional at 4 o'clock. Great job. I am so impressed at the fact that you have sustained this long through the day and you're still here. And I hope that you've been enjoying this. My goal with a presentation like this is that you always take away one or two good things. We have a very varied audience here. I hope that you find something that's useful, whether that's a good reminder, whether it's a change in perspective, maybe it's a new practice that you put into place. And in order to kind of preface why I dive into this topic, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. So I'm a graduate of Concordia, Wisconsin, and graduated with an English major and a Spanish minor, secondary education. Spent the first 5 years of my career teaching high school English and literature and coaching every sport under the sun, and I loved it. I loved being a teacher. I got my master's degree in literature and cultural theory, which I know. What does that even mean? I don't know, but that's my master's degree from the University of Milwaukee. And about a month after I finished that program, I received the call to go be a principal at Trinity Lutheran School, about 5 miles from the high school where I worked, my home congregation. I was 27 years old. I had no administrative experience. And apparently it was the most contentious voters meeting in Trinity's 169-year history. And I just can't imagine why. I don't know. I was the first female principal in the whole history. I mean, there were a lot of things that were working against me. And when I stepped into that role, it was actually our associate pastor who I sat down with my pastors and I said, I don't really know what you guys are thinking. This is comical. Why in the world would you want me to step into a leadership role when I don't have any experience? And one of them, I think very wisely said, we understand you don't have the administrative experience. We think that can be learned. We see that you have the leadership capabilities, and that's what we need more of right now. And I said, okay, that's wise. I think I'll take a shot at this. So my husband, who is also a Lutheran school teacher, we prayed about it a lot, we talked about it a lot, and we took a leap of faith, and I stepped into this administrative role, very young, very green, and understanding very quickly that I knew nothing. And so I had to approach this position with incredible humility. And one of the things I realized right off the bat, the school was at a downward climb, our enrollment was dropping. And I think part of what they were trying to do was regain some balance, and with a very strong pastoral male staff to kind of bring in a little bit of a different energy to the school, a younger energy, and kind of try something new. And I realized really quickly that the first thing that I had to do was to figure out how I was going to communicate and listen and help my current stakeholders, because our back door was wide open. And so our retention was not good at the moment, and when I came in, we also had some teacher turnover, some retirement, some things. So there's like shifting tectonic plates at our organization, and I realized really quickly that I didn't have long to try to start turning things around before those voters would be like, we told you so, she's a hot mess, get her out. And by that point, my old school wouldn't take me back. There weren't a lot of options. And so what I realized really quickly is that I actually had one advantage. I had one advantage, and that was my advantage was that we were trying really hard to build from the bottom up in our organization. Raise your hand if your organization is building from the bottom up. Your preschool, your child care feeds in and builds your school, or your congregation, younger family. We're kind of building bottom up. And I said, I said to my husband, I have one advantage. I am a young parent. I actually am. And we had at the time our son was an infant, my first of, I have 2 kids right now. And I said, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to really focus on meeting those parents where they're at. And I'm going to try to really build that base of preschool parents, and then I'm going to keep them. We're going to keep them because we have a fantastic school. And so that's what I did. And when I say I mean I, alongside an incredible teaching staff who really just needed a new cheerleader. to remind them of how awesome they were. And our preschool now runs at full capacity every year with a waiting list. I'm in my 6th year, and we have started doing that. We have started building from the bottom up. And some of the feedback that I get all the time is, man, you really do a nice job with parents, especially with young parents. And I go, well, the secret is I'm a young parent. But what I also realize, I've done this talk before, I do it in 2 scenarios. I do it for incoming teachers. So I go teach at Concordia University Mequon. I go and I'm a guest speaker for their class, and I go, what do you expect with new parents? Let me help you a little bit. And then I do it with an audience like this that might be a mix and people who have been doing this for a long time. And I also know that the longer you're in your ministry, the harder it is to reconnect with the new parents coming in. Because now you go, I used to be able to relate to those parents, and now it's like speaking a foreign language. I don't know them, I don't understand them. So I feel like at this point in my ministry, I'm well equipped to do this talk. Maybe 10 years from now, I'm going to say, I don't know, I don't get these new parents anymore either. But right now, I think I have a little bit of insight growing up and parenting in this culture. And so I hope that I'm able to, especially those of you who have so much more experience and wisdom than I do, maybe give you a little bit of a different insight and perspective based on my experience and also just knowing my own generation and what I face as a parent as well. I come from a long line of Lutheran educators, teachers, pastors, everything in between. Lutheran ed is kind of all that I know. And I'm going to guess that for a lot of you, you saw the word parent in a session, you were like, whoa, let's talk about parents, right? So if nothing else, this will be cathartic for you to talk about that. But also because we all know that it probably for many of us is one of our biggest stumbling blocks in our ministry, is that we can have things really going, and all it takes is 1 or 2 parents to make us question and to reevaluate our own ministry and our own ability to do our jobs. And it still happens to me all the time. Am I really an effective administrator if this many people are so unhappy or this many people are complaining? So I'm going to start with this because I love this question. How have parents changed in recent years? I'm saying within the last 10 years. And then the second part, here's the catharsis. And how do you feel about it? Okay? So again, if you can try to pair up, maybe if you've been in the ministry a little bit longer, if you're sitting by someone who hasn't, just to get a little bit of perspective, take just a little bit of time. In your own experiences, how have parents changed and how do you feel about it? Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, introduce yourselves.
just says, hey, had a hard time, like, nobody cares. But you have to, like, do something to grab you right away. It's like, they read it. You know, but that's how they do it. So that's what I think.
All right, I'm going to bring you back. Okay, so a fun fact about me, I have terrible handwriting and terrible spelling. Very funny things for an English and literature teacher. But I'm just going to jot down, because I'm just curious. Let's see if we have some common themes. So let's share out just a little bit. How do you feel like parents have changed? Try to put it in a little, less than, 3-minute explanation so I can kind of shorthand it. Give me some kind of ways that you think parents have changed recently. Anybody? Yes?
They went from taking the teacher's side to the kid's side.
Right. Okay, so that's a big one, right? We love taking the kids' side. Great.
Lack of respect.
Lack of respect for teachers. Sure. Good. What else? Yes?
More uninvolved. The older their kids get, the less involved they are.
Sure. Especially as their children get older. Yes?
They schedule every minute of their children.
Overscheduled.
They never want them to think they'll get bored or
Yes?
I used to feel they were always on my side and now I'm like,
Right.
You want to do what's best for the children. You're always trying to do, but you have to feel like the parents are attacking you first. You have to get them on
Right.
before you can do what's best for
You have to really gain their teamwork first. They don't start on your team. You got to get them on your team. Yeah.
I noticed with that 3-year-old, parents don't talk to your kids anymore.
Oh, interesting. Explain that a little bit more.
Have a phone.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
Their language skills aren't the same.
Sure. Okay, so we've lost some interpersonal communication with our own children. Yeah. Anything else?
They don't read anymore.
Isn't this great? Those of us that are parents in the room are like, I'm feeling personally attacked. I may or may not have read my child's kindergarten newsletter this week. Okay, now I'm not going to comment on it. Right? Good.
That have to do with information overload.
Sure.
They're
Right.
getting a phone call, they're getting an email, they're getting a text, they're getting a reminder, they're getting so much that I'd rather just not do any of it.
Right, right. Completely overstimulated. Good. Okay, so here's the first thing that I love pointing out after this exercise. And I understand I set you up for this, but the one thing that we never do is like, here's a really great way parents have changed over the last few years. Right? We don't do that. We don't do that. Our mind does not go to the way that this generation of parents has taken something from a previous generation and improved on it. And I'm putting myself in that category. I do the same thing. So we're going to get real wild here for just a moment. Does anybody feel like there's been an improvement in any area of parenting that you go, you know what I really respect about parents right now is this? Yes. Great. Okay, good. We have upped our interest in overall nutrition. I love it. Okay. Yep. Absolutely. Good. I would totally agree with you on that. Yes.
I think the stigma for getting their child help with counseling has really broken down.
I agree. That was a big one I was going to say, is I do have parents who are so much more receptive to the idea of exploring mental health and are open to the fact that it might be something that their child is experiencing and finding some ways to assist them with that. I think that's incredibly valid and true. Anything else? Yes? Very resourceful, right? It's sometimes too resourceful because you can find information and things from anywhere, but we do have a lot of parents who are very willing to dig in and do research and solve problems. Maybe it's not always the things we wish they were reading, but certainly very resourceful. Great. Okay. So in general, on a scale of 1, meaning I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty frustrated, to a 10 of, no, I actually feel pretty great about it. Just put in your hands, how are you feeling about the way that parents are parenting the kids that you're dealing with each day? So 1 is, please get me out of this situation. 10 is, I'm feeling pretty good. Where are you at right now in your personal ministry? Okay, somewhere between 1 and 10. Okay. We got some middle, maybe a little over, maybe a little bit under, okay? So in general, the majority of us are not feeling like we're really connecting and on the same page as parents right now. Maybe a lot of us feel like we spend a lot of our time trying to appease or figure out or co-parent, which is always a really fun one, especially when you're in the classroom. So let's talk a little bit about that phenomenon, why that is, and then how we are going to deal with that. So these are some of my favorite illustrations. Let's talk about some of the parents, different parenting styles, and some of you can relate to these. So the first one is the ghost AWOL parent. So these are the ones that are totally disconnected, and they you don't ever see them, you don't ever meet them. They're ghost AWOL. Second one is dry cleaner. I love this one. They drop them off at school. Here you go. Your job. You figure it out. You do all of the Christian development, by the way, because that is, it's not my strength. So you make them into Christian leaders. You make sure that they're great at studying. You make sure that they're disciplined. I'm going to go to work. Right? That's a dry cleaner parent. We have the helicopter parent, another teacher favorite. So that's the one that is monitoring, right, hovering right over, making sure that everything is going well for their child, constantly checking in with you. Oh, I noticed that my child's grade dropped to a C 3 seconds after you enter the test grade that they didn't do so well on, when we all know full well it's only the second week of the quarter. It's going to be okay, right? Helicopter parent. The karaoke parent, these are the ones that partner up with their kids all the time. They're your favorite in middle school because they're going to come together as a team. And oftentimes our karaoke parents are our students' friends and not their parents. Or if you really want whiplash, maybe you have the parent who sings karaoke with their child and then suddenly they are like, well, of course we support you in everything that you do, and you discipline my child the way you need to, until you do something that they don't like. And then they're back to being their child's friend, right? So you never really know where you stand with that parent. Am I the authority? Yes, no, depends on the day, right? That's the karaoke parent. The tech obsessed. So this is my favorite. Not only do they give their child a device, you could also follow them on TikTok, right? You could also follow their entire day on social media. So when they said they couldn't volunteer for PTL, you're like, oh, really? Because I saw what you were doing all day yesterday because you posted about it all day. So we have a tech-obsessed parent alongside a tech-obsessed child. And then this one down here, here it is. Some people call it the bulldozer parent. This is the commando parent. This is the parent that comes in guns blazing every time. And it's not just helicopters, it's not just monitoring, it is clearing the path for their child. And you, educator, youth director, DCE, head of childcare, you are in the path. And I will clear you out of the way if that is necessary. So some of you are familiar with that parent as well. So we have a mixture of some of these parenting styles. And these aren't all of our parents. I'm talking about the ones that are probably giving you the most challenges, are these styles of parenting. And so now let's talk a little bit about the shift. So back then, I've got a little bit of research that I share with you here. So back then, within the last, over 10 to 15 years ago, we had a parenting style that very much encouraged child independence, especially as they got into later schooling. So they had faith in the institution, and their whole goal was to make sure that when their child finished school, they were ready to go into the real world, right? You graduated from high school, and then you either got a job, you went to a technical school, you went to college, but you were on your own. And they trusted that we as educators had helped equip their children to do that. Okay, and that is what a lot of us miss. We miss that. And you talk to our college professors, they too miss that. So my dad is still at the university level, and the amount of students he has who simply, to put it in simple terms, they just can't hack it. They cannot hack it. They suddenly become independent and they can't do it. They can't manage his class, they can't manage any extracurriculars, and they come into him so stressed and so overwhelmed with managing a collegiate load that all of us in this room did, probably quite successfully on a campus away from our families, okay? So here's where we're at now. So you notice that this parent is pointing right here because, again, where does the finger always point back with blame? Back to you, right? So it's rarely the, oh, this is an at-home issue that you're seeing carrying over into school. I'm really sorry about that. We're working with that at home. It's a, well, what's your problem? What are you guys doing? We're great parents, so it must be a school thing, right? So we see that a lot more. And the kids are running the show. Raise your hand if in your organization, whether it's your church or school, whatever, you have heard the words, well, this was my child's choice. My child chose your school, and my child is no longer happy, so my child is choosing a new school, right? And so that has been the shift in attitude as well. So here's some statistics that should be really interesting to you. So from 2010 to 2015, so it's a little bit of older data, but still, 60 to 80% of kids move back home after college. Now I understand that to an extent, right? Depends on the job, depends if you find, right? But 60 to 80%, that's a lot of kids moving back home after they finish college. And 8% of those kids brought their parents to an interview. Ooh. Yikes. Yikes, 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 yikes. You want a karaoke parent, that is a karaoke parent. I will be with you wherever you go, even to your first job interview. That's something, right? Right? Yep. Yeah. So here's the deal about the kids that we are seeing graduate. They have what Tim Elmore calls it this. I think it's so wise. He calls it artificial maturity. And you guys know exactly what I mean. We have a generation of kids with artificial maturity. They are incredibly worldly. They have been exposed to information at a rapid pace, but they have no way to filter that information. So they know a lot about things without knowing how to process them emotionally, without knowing how to handle them socially. And then we send them out into the adult world, and they are incredibly ill-equipped to actually handle life's challenges. So they have this artificial maturity. And it's because just giving you knowledge doesn't mean you're mature. You can read something online and gain knowledge, but it doesn't bring wisdom along with it. And the same thing with giftedness. We have kids who are incredibly smart, but that's still not translating to maturity, because the way that most of us gained maturity was through independence, through experiences, through adults that push us that direction, and parents who supported that push into independence, and that's what we're missing. So our kids don't act childlike, but they are childish. Okay. So now, as we start thinking about this generations of parents that you're getting, and I love to say it's going to get better, but it's probably not going to get better, is now we're seeing some of these kids become adults. Tons of information, inability to process, to turn that information into knowledge and wisdom, and instead to lash out in what many ways feel very childlike. And so I'm a principal who's also an 8th grade teacher for a portion of my day, and it's almost comical. Sometimes I'll have an interaction with a parent and go, this is so funny. I just did this with an 8th grader 15 minutes ago. Right? Except it's not funny, right? It's not funny. It's terrifying. It's terrifying that when I'm using some similar techniques to approach both of those things. Okay, so right about the time that all of us are sitting pretty high in our horses, myself included, where we're like, man, these parents need to figure it out, I put in just a little bit of a reminder. And this is going to be the first part of this presentation. Let's talk about what parenting right now feels like in this generation. So there's a great quote here from Virginia Satir. Parents teach in the toughest school in the world, the school of making people. A parent is the board of education, the principal, the classroom teacher, the janitor, all wrapped in one. And for how many of you, your organization, are many of these situations happening where there is only one parent? And so that parent is doing all of these roles without a helper. So I'm obviously a young mother. I have a husband who doesn't go away from me very often, except when he really needs to get away from me, which I don't blame him for. He's a backpacker, so sometimes in the summer he'll take like a few days and go solo backpacking where I can't even call him. And it might be 3 days, and in those 3 days, I spend the majority of my time feeling so much respect for every single mother in the world. And I do it for 2 or 3 days at a time, right? And so I think part of what we're going to look at is the perspective and doing a little bit of empathy. So we also have to look at, and maybe you have some friends that are like this right now, our parents are in such incredibly uncharted territory. You ask a parent of a middle school and high school right now how they're handling their child's phone, and just watch the fear and the panic and the uncertainty spill out. I can't tell you how many parents I go that will say to me, Jenna, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with this phone thing. How much monitoring is too much? How much isn't enough? Then I take it away, but then their friends have it. So then there's all of these things are also new for them. And so they're dealing with a lot of, of new things that they never had before. We also have kids that no longer understand innocence and wonder. They're not innocent. You know that as a middle school teacher, I feel like I can never do anything that's cool or original for middle school kids. Right? Because if they really want to know anything, they can go look it up themselves. It's really hard to be a teacher and a parent when you've lost that with children too. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting that gives us some insight into what parents are up against, again, because of this onslaught of information available to kids. In 2017, there was a career survey given to high school students of what their top choice would be, career-wise. Okay, here are the results. 9.5% wanted to be a CEO. All right, you go. Aim for the stars. 9.5% a CEO. 9.8% a Navy SEAL. Also, wow, okay. 13.6% a U.S. Senator. And 43.4% a personal assistant to a celebrity. Not a celebrity, folks. The celebrity's assistant. What does that mean for our children? That they go, that seems great. I think Kim Kardashian's assistant. Yep. I don't want to be the one in the spotlight. I just want to be there absorbing all of the cool things happening around me. And that type of career aspiration is not something that requires what we are trying to give them. I mean, some organizational skills, yes. Some personal skills, yes. I don't want to demean being an assistant, obviously. However, that certainly isn't what we as Christian leaders are aiming for our kids to be, right? And so we have to think about, this is what parents are up against. And now you put yourself in the shoes of parents. So first of all, our society has completely baptized youthfulness, right? Being young and being youthful is all the rage. So we have these parents who are feeling that pressure. So there's this role reversal. We have these kids who have this artificial maturity, so they're acting like adults, very immature adults, but adults. And then these parents who have lost the beauty of being the respected mentor, authority figure who instead want to be doing TikToks alongside their children. And so we have this complete paradox and reversal of roles. When I was a child, it was very clear in my house who was the child and who was the parent. And in a lot of cases, that has become incredibly convoluted, right, between those two things. So raise your hand if you have experiences in your organization that feel like this. Parents who are childlike, children who act like adults but who aren't actually mature. Yep. Okay, so we're feeling like that's pretty universal. So we're flaking on commitments, we're not reading communication, and it ends up getting all of us very frustrated. So now let's get into what are we going to do about it? So here's the first thing that we're going to do, is the first thing we're going to remember is just this classic phrase, I was a child of the late 90s, or of the early 90s, I should say, late 80s, early 90s. And so that was when the WWJD bracelets were all the rage, wore them all the time. So we need to remember first, what would Jesus do? And we're going to start from a place of empathy, because one of the things that has made me the most successful as a school leader is practicing empathy all the time, even with the people who are the hardest to empathize with. Now remember, empathy does require some level of putting yourself in that person's shoes and trying to experience what they're experiencing, which isn't always easy. But this is what Jesus would have us do. So first of all, they come across as unreasonable or overbearing, but here's how they are likely feeling. Number one, incredibly insecure. I would wager that we have the most insecure generation of parents right now. And one of the reasons they are so insecure is because their parenting is on display at all times. And some of them choose that, so well, that's a choice that you made. But even if they aren't choosing to flash their lives around social media, their friends are. And so they are constantly comparing themselves. It's exactly the reason why our teens are struggling with anxiety and depression. They're doing the same thing. But guess what? So is our young generation of parents. So they are incredibly insecure. They're also very afraid and very overprotective. School safety, one of the number one issues that parents will bring up. And that's partially, again, in thanks to our world, to our media, to what we focus on in the media. You guys know they love it when a Lutheran church or a Lutheran school somebody gets in trouble. Scandal, right? They love it. They love it. And what happens to our parents is they go, gosh, is my Lutheran school not even safe? Oh, where can I send my kids? And so you see that come out. And then incredibly overwhelmed, and you guys hit it on the head. They are overscheduled. They are overloaded with information. And part of it is because their kids can't miss out, you guys, because then they're not a good parent. There's the insecurity. My child is 5 years old. He's in kindergarten, my firstborn. And there's like a mom thread, and the moms put me on the thread, and I said, can you take me off the mom thread? I love you guys. I have to separate my worlds a little bit, because all they do on the mom thread is talk about all the things they're signing up for. Hey, Jenna, you doing T-ball plus flag football plus rec soccer plus... Whoa! And finally they just stopped chatting with me, because I was always like, no, I can't. My 5-year-old gets to do summer things, swimming lessons, T-ball. Summer, go nuts. School year, Everett goes to school with his friends all day, who he loves dearly. And then we go home, we do this wild thing called having dinner as a family. Woo, I know. And then it gets wilder. We go to bed at a normal time. Right? But do you realize what a unicorn that makes me in my generation? People are like, but what? You didn't start him in basketball? But what if he is going to be the next basketball star? Well, I think his odds are slim, right? But I'm telling you this from experience, because I've been on these threads and I hear these parents going, "Oh, you're starting T-ball? Okay, you know what? I'm gonna talk to my husband. I'm gonna talk to Jim, and we're gonna talk about T-ball." I watch it happen, and they get sucked into this because of peer pressure. They're experiencing peer pressure. So then I go to right here. Do you remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Okay, we talk about it all the time with our students. These are basic human needs. Our parents have those same needs. And those higher levels of feeling successful, accepted, loved, our parents have those needs. And they are not feeling that way in society. So one of your goals as a leader is, how can I make sure that my parents' needs, psychological needs, are also being met whenever I encounter them? Whether that's in a positive situation or a negative situation, let's start there. For some of them, even their basic needs aren't being met, right? But for a lot of them, those higher needs of love and acceptance are not being met. Especially when you have situations with single parents or tough divorces or things that are trauma. That's what a lot of parents are also lacking. So we always say, kids can't function in the classroom if their basic needs aren't met. Parents can't function in adult conversation and relationships until their basic needs are met. And so if we're not thinking about that, if we're not addressing it, then we're having fruitless conversations with parents, because they are not in a place mentally where they're ready to have constructive conversation with us. So then I put this one at the bottom because this one is so convicting for me. Man, I pray for my students. Ooh, yeah. I pray for my teachers all the time. I have a rock star staff. They're so great. How often do I pray for my students' parents? Unless it's a prayer of, dear Lord, don't let me say something inappropriate in the next 2 minutes. Right? But how often are they on the top of our prayer list? And I want to challenge you to do that, because I can tell you that some of the parents that I have started praying fervently for, my attitude when they come at me, which is all the time, is still adjusted. Because you can't put someone on the top of your prayer list and not look at them differently. And not look at them and see a little bit more Christ every single time and see your mission. So that's going to be one of my challenges. If nothing else, if you walk away today and go, I'm going to start praying for my parents more, great. That's a fantastic place to start. So this is what we know. So here's what we're going to do. Here's a few things. I did put this whole presentation up on my app, just so you know. So if you're or on the app, no, I don't have an app. On the app. let's be real. I'm a parent of like 3.5 kids. I don't have time for a nap. And so if you're like me and you don't have good handwriting, you can always find this later. So how do we respond to parents in a way, and we're specifically talking in the context of avoiding conflict. So I did a lot of research. Oh, hello computer, did you go to sleep? Happens to me all the time. There we go. When I was doing my doctoral work, I did a lot of research in transformational leadership, and a lot of my coursework was in servant leadership. Raise your hand if you're familiar with this style. All your hands should be in the air. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. Jesus was a servant leader. But again, the thing about servant leadership is it looks just like any other style of leadership. You are still in charge. You are still making decisions. You are doing all of those things. But the root of servant leadership right here is that they possess an others first mindset. So the servant leader constantly works, here it is, to help other people win. And you're like, Jenna, no, the parents already think they win all the time. They always win. Trust me, every conversation they win. And we're going to talk about what that kind of mentality means, because the one thing I will not tell you to do is just sit there and roll over. That is not part of this talk, okay? But we are going to talk about how we can help them feel like they're winning when they're not really winning, okay? But all of that comes down to servant leadership. So we do this all the time with our kids. We are very servant-focused with our kids. We love to put them first. But how often do we do this for our parents? So here's what servant leadership means. This is a great quote that I love. It means that power is a means, not an end. And power is a tool, and it's not even always the most important tool that you wield. Looking at leadership this way changes our perspective as teachers and school leaders. We have the power, but we don't have to use it as a weapon. So imagine if we approached a parent concern with a servant heart, and how might that look different? At the end of the day, regardless of what a parent thinks, you do have the authority. You do. It's your classroom. It's your youth group. The school where I'm at, it is the school that they have called me to be in charge of. But sometimes we slip into that pattern of going, because I hold the power, you're going to have to bend to my will because I have the power. And instead, if we approach it with, well, power isn't the end goal. It's something that I have, but I don't have to use it as a tool. So instead, when I meet parents, how can I meet them at their level rather than them feeling like they're down here and I'm up here? And that's what the servant leadership approach does. It equalizes. You look at Jesus' ministry with his disciples, and while they knew he was the Son of God, well, I mean, depends on the day. Some days they knew, some days they didn't. Jesus didn't lord that over them as a way of, I'm going to wield power over you because of this. He used it to empower them as his followers, and he served just as much as he asked them to serve as well. I love this Mother Teresa quote, "There's joy in transcending self to serve others." Man, sometimes our service does not feel like joy. A lot of times our service feels like martyrdom. Raise your hand if you have felt like a martyr in the last 3 weeks of your life, right? Where you have given and given and given and feel like all that is in received is just taken, right? And it lowers our cup and it lowers our cup. So this shift into servant leadership is the shift into understanding and knowing that is the relationship. That level of humility and service is part of what we're called to do, regardless of our position. So here's some things we're going to do. We're going to start by building credibility. I love this. Nobody starts on your team. Yes, absolutely. You have no money in the bank. I don't care if you've been teaching for 25 years. That new parent comes in, you have no money in the bank, especially with this generation of parents. They will give you no credibility. And I'm not saying that's right or fair. I'm just telling you that's how it is. As an administrator, it's the same for me. Every time a new family comes in, I have to prove myself as trustworthy, consistent, a model of Christ every single time. So here's some things to think about. I want you to pause for a moment. We can't take back our first impressions, we know that, but I want you to think about the last negative parent encounter that you had. You were like, I don't know, 20 minutes ago. The last parent encounter that you had, negative parent encounter. Prior to that, how many positive interactions had you had with that parent? Prior to the first time you had a conflict, how many positive interactions had you had? And maybe some of you are like, plenty, yeah, lots of them. Some of you might have gone, I don't know, it was like the third week of school and this parent just came at me. I don't even really know their last name, right? And maybe some of you go, well, I tried to do some positive interactions, but I don't know that I really got anywhere. But I want you to think about what can you do to have as many positive interactions before the other foot drops? Because a lot of times the other foot's going to drop. So what are some things you can do? So I'm a principal. I spend some time in classrooms, obviously, but we have 2 buildings. I greet at one of those 2 buildings every day. Every day I'm outside. I'm sure many of you are. Every day after school, I'm outside in that car line. I hold the cell phone box, my favorite job. Give everybody back their phones as they leave the building. The ones that I have not let them have all day. Here you go, here you go. Here's one of the things that I do, a little bit of a parent hack. I have a lot of parents that will stand outside and wait. We do like a car line that's like a drive-through. It's beautiful. They like drive up, you throw the kid in the car, and they keep going. But parents who park across the street and walk over, I'll walk over and say, Joel, hey, how are you? How's work? How you doing? And not say a word about Joel's kids. We might get there eventually. I'm just going to ask Joel about Joel. How's your wife? How's Kelly? How are you guys doing? Oh, your kid goes here? Great. Here they are. Have a great night. But my interaction isn't actually about their kids. It's just about Joel and his wife and his family. And then when I have to call Joel, because John, Joel's like, well, Jenna knows me. He knows my family. So I feel a little bit more comfortable having this conversation than I would have if I hadn't just asked Joel how Joel is doing. So if you haven't taken some time to just get to know your parents as parents without talking about their kids, I highly encourage it. You know why my generation loves it? Because it makes us feel accepted and loved and valued as parents. So if you can do that, if you can find opportunities for that, if you can start a parent-teacher conference and say, hey, before we talk about Johnny, how are you doing? How are things at home? How can I support you? How can I pray for you? Right? Start by just asking about them as a parent and see if that changes your dynamic a little bit. I'm a big one for sending home authentic praise about kids. I really talk to my teachers about this. Nobody wants I can tell you just phoned it home, you just phoned it in. Like, Johnny had a great week. Or like your principal told you to do a sunshine note. That was a sunshine note. That was not something valuable. I try to catch kids doing good things and send home authentic praise that is pointed at that child's specific gifts. I love being able to send home a note to an 8th grade parent that says, hey, you know, we've talked a lot about how Giovanna has struggled with A, B, or C. Let me just tell you that this week, she absolutely nailed it on this assignment. She was so confident. She was on time. Because our generation of parents, we are so used to social media comments that lack total authenticity, that a real, authentic comment that we know means you have to know my kid to make that comment is priceless to us. So when you give positive feedback, is it authentic? Authentic, is it child-centric, focused on that specific child? Because if you can give the same feedback to 6 different parents, are you putting that time in? Because we will, my generation will weed that out pretty quickly. I do this one all the time, encouraging constantly. We're glad you're part of our St. John's family, our Trinity family, our Holy Name family, whatever is the name of your organization. We, collectively, not just me as your child's teacher or principal, but our entire organization is so glad that you're here. I do that all the time. Listening without focusing on response. We all know. We know this is interpersonal communication 101. I just want to tell you that my most heated parent meetings, I wish I could video record myself because I do a lot of this. Yep, that sounds hard. Yep. Right? And I just absorb. I just absorb and I take all the hits. In fact, my favorite thing as a principal is to be a blocker. I love to absorb the first round of heat. Bring it on. Give me the tongue lashing. Give me all of it. Because I'm the second party. I'm not actually the teacher. So, I mean, sometimes they're genuinely mad at me. That's fine. But if they're mad at a teacher, I beg them to come yell at me first, right? Get it all out on me. And then let's have a rational conversation once you've gone off. And now you're ready to talk to the teacher. Perfect. Good. Okay. So sometimes you have to be prepared for that conversation as well. And then I know that I always think about my response, but really getting their full story before you think about how you're going to respond. Because a lot of times we're not even ready to respond. Will they come into the meeting and we think we already know what we're going to say? And then by the end of the conversation, things have changed. This last one is my favorite because we all know we need to get to know your families in a casual setting. But even when you're emotionally exhausted, do you know what I don't want to do on a Friday afternoon? I don't want to go to a basketball tournament. I don't want to see a parent. I don't want to see a kid unless they're my own. Right? And yet on that Friday night, when you show up to that basketball game, you sit down by that parent, you take that deep breath, you say a prayer and say, Lord, give me the emotional energy to have this conversation. And then I really challenge you, try really hard not to talk about school. Talk about what that parent life outside of school. And if they bring it up, they bring it up. Well, it is what it is, right? That's part of our role. But as often as you can, try to change that conversation. This part is one that I do a lot as an administrator. Sometimes I do it for myself. Sometimes I do it on the behalf of another person if our organization really has messed up. And it's accepting responsibility for the part that we play in the conflict. And sometimes that's really hard because we go, I genuinely don't think I did anything. And sometimes you're right. You genuinely did not do anything. But sometimes you might look and go, you know what? I actually could have communicated that better. I'm going to give you that one, parent. Yep. That was a me issue. I should have communicated that better. Or, you know what? I was actually really defensive when that parent came at me. I think my tone might not have been a tone that I would usually use, right? How can you accept responsibility to do that with humility? Again, there's Jesus for you. To do it with humility. To be able to say, I didn't handle this the best way that I could have. I say that to parents all the time as an administrator. Man, I had a big social media issue this year with middle schoolers. I know, you're shocked. It was over Snapchat. Can you believe it? There was drama in my school about Snapchat. And I had a meeting with a specific set of parents, and afterward I said, you know what? You're right. While I stand behind the decisions that I made, the way that I communicated that with you could have been a lot better. And I'm really sorry for that. That's how you felt when I communicated this message to you. And you know what that does a lot of time? It really takes the wind out of the sails. That mom whose voice was way up here, she came way down after I exercised a little bit of humility. Yeah.
Just a question.
Sure.
I'm a minister in high school.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you get your teachers? Like sometimes, how do you get them to communicate or accept responsibility?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're always right too. 'Cause
Right.
They're the new age too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What I mean?
I have a big policy, and I'm pretty type A. I'm a little controlling. I'm working on it, kind of. But especially with my young teachers, when they first come in, we sit down and I tell them, hey, when you start if you're having a parent issue, before you respond things, I'm going to really ask you to sit down and talk through it with me first. I do. I ask them to pre-conference with me, and not that some of them won't still shoot from the hip with the email, but I do ask them not to first. And then oftentimes, we craft the response together. Anybody else do that in this room?
Try.
Yeah. Do you have some that won't let you do
My
that?
problem is, and they say I'm micromanaging, which, okay.
And I say
my
yes.
thing is trying to get them to communicate too, because they're
Right.
like, no, it's on the parent. I'm like, no.
Right. And I think that's a really good,
How do you?
I think that's really wise. I have a statement in here that I say a little bit later on. But what they're really doing is they're doing the thing that we do, which is they're doing wishful thinking. That's wishful thinking. You're right. In a perfect world, you wouldn't have to communicate that many times, but that's not where we live, and that's not the parents that we deal with. So you have two choices. Either do it my way, which is to over-communicate, proactively communicate, or do it your way, but I'm not going to be able to defend you every time a parent comes at you for your poor communication. So I'm going to ask you to do it my way, and if it doesn't work, we can come back and talk about it. But that is living in a wishful world, and we live in the wishful world all the time. Well, if only parents would. Well, guess what? Parents don't. So we can either get on board, make some changes, or we can just get ready to be punching bags. I don't like being a punching bag.
Do you have teachers that do it well in your school that you could mentor with other ones?
Not really.
No.
There's one that's better.
Sure.
But it's hard to get them, and it's high school.
It is high school. Yep. I lived in the high school world. It's hard. High school, you're kind of your own island in a way because you're very autonomous in your subject area. I mean, if you can get somebody come in and do kind of some maybe like department-wide. I don't know, sometimes high school teachers have a bad attitude about that. Sorry if you're a high school teacher. I did. Like, I don't need PD. I teach high schoolers, but great.
We'll soon.
Bring me in. Where are you from? Okay. Right, so we understand this means we can't always be right, which is really hard for all of us, but we're keeping the end goal in mind. I am quick to apologize and slow to blame. But realize, look how I apologize. I didn't say I say that they're right all the time. Here's how I apologize. I'm really sorry that happened. Usually I am because y'all are wasting my time in my office, so I am really sorry that happened, right? But I'm not saying it's my fault. I'm not saying it's the teacher's fault, but I am sorry something happened that made you this upset. Because genuinely, none of us want to see parents hurting. Of course we don't. We genuinely are sorry that happened. How can we prevent this from happening again? We cannot go back in time. I do this all the time at the end of a meeting. Hey, thank you for coming and thank you for talking. I know that we can't fix the past. So what do we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Together, collectively, as a team. And making sure that we're telling parents, we, as a teacher parent, we want to be your partner. We really do want to be your partner. Another question I love asking, it's one of my favorite ones, take it or leave it. How are you handling this at home? This is my favorite one for behavioral things. You know, Johnny's been really off the wall. He's been, disrespectful. He's pushing other peers. How do you deal with this behavior at home? You know why? It is so revealing. You'll have some parents that go, well, he doesn't act that way at home. Then you know what you're up against. You are up against denial. Okay, so Johnny is an angel at home. Must be nice for you. Okay, but that's going to change the way that we approach it at school. Okay, we understand that we do not have a parent that's going to see eye to eye. So we're going to have to do some pretty strategic methods to work with Johnny and ease this in with a spoonful of sugar for this parent, because they simply are not going to accept that we all know that Johnny does this at home. Let's be real. Okay? But here's the other thing you'll find out. Sometimes you will be pleasantly surprised. This is my favorite when a parent goes, Jenna, I'm going to be honest with you. We have tried sticker chart incentive. We have tried this. We have tried this. We have talked to their doctor. We have talked to their counselor. And we are lost. And then you go, oh my gosh, let's be partners. Let's work on this. How can we communicate better? How can we be on the same team? Their response gives you direction on how to do it. So what you're not saying is, what are you doing at home? We're just going to do what you do. Of course not. That's not realistic. But sometimes you can match some incentives. Sometimes you can give similar rewards or remind their child of the things. Sure, sometimes that works. But if you don't ask, you don't know. And instead, we give prescribed solutions. Oh, this is what's happening. Don't worry. We'll help you solve it, because we're educators, we're professionals, we have child development background, without really letting them explain what they're also doing as parents. Okay? So give them that platform. Ask those questions so that they know that as well. One of the other things that I just wanted to share is that one of my favorite quotes is, good teachers constantly strive to improve, and they focus on something they can control on their own performance. Other teachers wait for something else to change. Right there it is. They're waiting for something else to change. Great teachers look to themselves for answers. Poor teachers look elsewhere. That's from Todd Whitaker, who's a great author. Writes some principalship books that I'll give you later on. But we have to make that choice as a teacher, as an educator. Am I humble enough to realize that I might need to make a change, like how I do my communication? Or am I, as the principal, teacher, DCE, going to put the blame somewhere else, like back on those parents? Like, well, if they would just, right? And so great teachers are the ones that go, this is the way that it is. I have high expectations for my students. I have higher expectations for myself. Okay. We are educators, whatever realm that you are in. So one of the things that I want you to think about is how to model the behavior that you want to see with your parents. We do it with our students. How are you modeling this behavior? These are some of my all-time favorites. Here we go. If we're going to be effective leaders, we need to learn how to be patient with difficult people. Period. You will not work in a situation without difficult people. You have to learn how to be patient, number one. Number two, you don't have to like the parents. You just have to act like you like them. And isn't it true? It's true, because there are going to be days that you are really angry, but you model the behavior you want to see. You don't get to get up here with a parent, because you have to model the behavior you want them to see. I do this every time. I've got this one parent, I tell you what, they voice text me every email. You got one of these? Oh, yeah. So I'll get a 3-paragraph email with no punctuation, grammar teacher, no capitalization, and like words substituted out that I have to seriously pull out a translator to figure out what they're saying. You know how many times I've wanted to write back the same way? Oh my gosh, can you imagine how fun? Just write back one solid paragraph with no breaks, substitute some words so they have no idea what I'm saying, but I don't. I still say, good afternoon, comma, thank you so much for expressing your concerns. I think what you're trying to say is, add in my translation to make sure I'm correct, and then model the desirable behavior, right? Because we are professionals, and that is what we will do. Okay, so part of modeling desirable behavior is modeling compromise. It just is. And we can't compromise on everything, folks. There's a lot we can't compromise on. We will not compromise on our doctrine. We will not do it. We will not compromise on how we're teaching Jesus. We're not going to compromise on that. If I have a classroom management plan that I'm using that's effective, I'm only going to be able to compromise so far on that. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room with what I can do, okay? But there are some things I can compromise with you on. If you as a parent need a little bit more communication, I can't do the daily email. I'm going to be honest, I just can't, right? I've got too much other stuff. But I can say we're going to touch base at the end of the week. And I'm going to ask you to hold me accountable on that. Sometimes you might have to send me a message if I forget. I can compromise a little bit on that. Okay? So how can we teach our parents a better way to communicate? How can we teach our parents a better way to interact with one another and with their kids? We do that through modeling. I'm going to tell you one more thing. You guys know this is true. When you argue or get into a conflict with a parent, who wins? Say it louder for people in the back. Oh, no. Somebody wins. The parent wins every time. It doesn't matter if you're actually right, and in the moment you win. Okay, so you win in the argument, that parent leaves head down, tail between their legs. You have won for approximately 20 seconds. Why?
They're going to get on Facebook.
Bam, there it is. Facebook, parking lot. It does not matter. Your win is temporary every time. I don't win if I have the last word with a parent. I'm just now the principal who's nasty. Oh, you should have heard what Jenna said to me in that conversation. How dare her, whatever, right? You will not win. And that's the simple truth of it. And so instead of us going into these conflicts going, I'm going to win, I'm going to get the last word, I will be right, realize it's not going to work. The best meeting is where you walk out and say, hey, I think we have a proactive plan for the future. You feel good about it? I feel good about it. We've both come to a place, hopefully, of reconciliation. It's not always going to be perfect at the same time. That's a win. That is a win. When you're both moving forward the plan that you both agree is fair and ready to prevent something for the future. Now they go to the parking lot and go, you wouldn't believe that, Mrs. Smith. I went in there so angry and I left and I think we have a plan, right? They won't be able to believe either that you were able to do that together. Constantly conference. So I'm a principal of a small school. We have about 200 kids. But I have a goal each year of having a FaceTime phone call or some sort of conversation with every parent on my campus. And actually, this is my time of year to do it. I probably shouldn't have come to this conference. I should be in my office making phone calls. But yeah, Syria, she doesn't understand either. Why aren't you doing that? But I do it. I pick up the phone and I call these families. Here's my conversation with them. Hi, so-and-so. It's Jenna Roeske. First point, know your child's not in trouble. Okay, start there, right? The principal calls, number one. Know your child's not in trouble. Know your child's not sick. Do you have a moment to chat? Sure. Hey, I just want to start by saying thank you for choosing Trinity. Gosh, we're so glad you're here. Thank you for letting us be your child's school. Oh, you're welcome. Great. Since I have you on the phone and you have a few minutes, how's your kid doing? How's Jimmy doing? Any questions? Comments? Concerns? I know I say I have an open door policy, but let's be real, you're not in my building that often, so I'm kind of giving you a platform. Let me have it. They don't always know it's coming, which is better. I get a lot of authentic things. I'm going to tell you guys, here's a secret. I get a lot of praise. Not me, for the school. So for every phone call that I get that maybe I have a tough conversation, which by the way reveals things you didn't know were going on, and can help you be proactive before a family walks out the back door, I get 3 conversations of somebody saying, can I just tell you how such and such a teacher is amazing? You know what I do with that phone conversation? You know what I do. I write that teacher a note. Hey, just talk to so-and-so's parents. Maybe they haven't said anything to you lately, but they think you're a rock star. And then the concerns, I do not go like, all right, Lisa, had a phone call today. Nope. Then I take a look at the concern and I use my discretion. Is it something I need to bring up with Lisa right away? Do I wait until I've done maybe an evaluation and we're having a one-on-one meeting? Typically, though, I'm going to want that teacher to know that concern's out there and make sure they know. But now I'm the director of that conversation, not that parent sending a nasty email when they finally hit their limit. If you can proactively communicate with parents that way, I so recommend it. And it's not always practical. It's not always feasible. And maybe it's not every family for you, but maybe in your head you know the ones that it is, that you can have that proactive conversation. These are some of my favorite questions to ask. Use these in conferences. Use these in conversations. I noticed that. I wonder why. Tell me more about. I've been noticing in the classroom that. Okay? I'm wondering why, and this is where you open that door to see if there's something happening at home. I'm wondering why. I've seen a difference in behavior. Are you seeing this at home? Is there something going on I should know about? And tell me more about this. Can you tell me a little bit more about what happened on the day that you say Betsy was shoved into the locker? I don't know, right? Tell me a little bit more about that. You give them these questions instead of just starting with a definitive statement of, no, this is exactly how it is, and now let's go from there. Okay, so ask more questions and make more statements that open up the conversation that allow them to be heard. Okay, this is for your teachers. Proactively communicate. Proactively. My best teachers define their expectations very quickly and very clearly and very proactively. Define your expectations. Send those updates with common communication hubs, and communicate the good, the bad, and the ugly, and do it quickly. I'm so grateful for the teacher that goes, hey, this happened during third hour. I want you to know. I'm talking to you right now. I'm calling the parent during lunch. Yes, girlfriend, do it. Call that parent before their child gets in the car. Every time that you can. If you are a teacher, maybe this is just me as a principal, if you need me to step in your classroom so you can make that phone call, oh my goodness, just tell me that. I will drop whatever I'm doing, I'm sure it's important anyway, and I will run down there so that you can make that phone call. I'm serious. It is so I know it's so painful for you, but it's so much worse when the kid goes home and gives the message first. Don't let them do it. And honestly, any other principals in the room? Okay, only a couple. Okay, I'm telling the teachers, hold your principals accountable for that. They really want that too. Let them know, like, hey, if I have a parent issue and I want to call a parent, can I count on you to cover for me for a few minutes so that I can do that? Hold us accountable to do that. Hey, can I run this email by you? I really hope your principals are saying yes. Absolutely. Get me in your court. Loop me in, because I don't like getting those phone calls either. This is huge. Clearly indicate your communication style. I have a second grade teacher who is retiring. I love her dearly. I'm going to miss her so dearly. She's not good at email. Nope. She tells me all the time, Jen, I wish parents would just pick up the phone and just call me. I told her, I said, Lisa, did you tell the parents that? Oh. Can you tell them that? Hey, just be honest. I'm not great at email. I'm not always great at responding the same day. Sorry, it's just not my strength. But if you pick up the phone and call me, I'm more than happy to talk. Here's my number at school. Just tell them. Be honest about what your communication style is, because yours is not the same as the person next door to you, right? So be honest about that. And then communicate respectfully with all people. I have to put that, that's actually just for me. It doesn't matter which parent it is. It doesn't matter how many encounters you've had. You maintain the same level of respect for all of them. Okay, so here's the last one. So you got the email, because it's always an email. It's the email that you start reading and your heart drops to your feet and you go, here it is. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be ugly. So here's some things that we're going to do versus not going to do. We're going to take time to pray and think about it before hitting send. So you are not going to respond to that email in your 4-minute passing period. Don't do it. You are certainly not going to respond to that email over your lunch, because, my friend, you deserve your lunch. And they don't get to take all your time. Set your boundaries. And before you respond, you're going to take time to think and pray. And I should have really entered in right there. And conference, preferably not with all the other teachers at your lunch table, so it becomes a big gossip thing. But with one trusted person, great. With your administrator, if you trust them, even better, right? It is okay to express, I got this email that really hurt me and made me really angry, and I'd like some help responding to it. Yes, absolutely, do that, take that step. When you do respond, thank them for expressing their concerns and schedule a meeting. And that's it. I tell my teachers this all the time, please don't do anything else. Don't offend yourself in that email. I'm sorry, they don't deserve it. They're dropping accusations, they're putting projections on you. What they need to get back from you is a thank you for your concerns. Let's schedule a meeting. And you can certainly say something like, I can tell there's been a miscommunication, or I'm not quite sure that what you heard is exactly what happened, but this is going to be our next step. It's not going to be a 2-paragraph email back from you explaining in exact detail what happened, because emails don't read tone. And you know what does express tone? Their child. So it won't matter how pragmatic and logical you are. If their kid has come home emotional, they don't care. So you have to get that face-to-face meeting. Then when you get there, you begin that meeting with prayer. Man, I'm sorry, I don't care if your parent is a parent who supports Christian education or one who's just there because you're the private school in town. We have some of those, right? You know that. You start with prayer, and they feel just a little bit more hesitant to, like, the minute you finish prayer, start screaming. Especially if the prayer, and again, not telling you how to pray the way the Spirit leads you to pray, but I always thank the Lord for that parent and for that student, and pray that the meeting would best serve the needs of our whole community. And that is genuine. Those are all things that I'm praying for, and they need to hear that before you start your meeting. And then you will listen first. You heard my and you don't know how many times that while I'm doing them, my hands are clenched under the table, like, I don't know how much longer I can maintain this, while they continue to spew accusations at me, but the whole time. And no matter what, your voice stays quiet. The louder they get, the quieter I get. Sometimes I'm barely whispering. Lean in. I'm still talking. Because you start to feel foolish, my friends. You can't maintain that level of shrill with the other person talking calmly before you start to feel self-conscious. And eventually we start coming down, right? Okay, there's an exception to every rule. I'm sure there are some parents that could maintain that all the way to heaven, right? But a lot of times, they're going to bring it down. See? Good. Use your husband for practice. That's fantastic. Yep. But this is what I tell my young teachers all the time. You do all of these things. That does not mean you cower. You do not sit there and go, I'm sorry. No! You are the professional in your field. Of course you are. And once you get through all of these steps and you've listened and then you say, thank you so much. Okay, let me talk through from my perspective what's going on here. And then throughout that conversation we say, oop, do we miss a communication here? Or, oh, is there a conflict I didn't know about? We do that, and at the whole time you still maintain your authority. You still maintain who you are in the classroom. And sometimes you admit, like, hey, again, I can compromise with this. Like, I can't do this. How can we come to an agreement? None of this means that you are weak. None of this means that you are not the professional in the room. It is modeling desirable behavior. Because the next time that parent comes in, maybe it'll be a little better. And the next time it comes in, it'll be a little bit better. I will tell you, I've had some parents over the last 6 years. And from the first time they've come into my office till now, our meetings have grown very different. They have. I'm not saying they still don't get upset. Or they'll still get upset over silly things that I don't understand why they're upset. But when they approach me, it's a whole heck of a lot more like this. Because I have modeled it over and over. And for those of you who only have that parent for a year, you are modeling that behavior for your colleague. Thank you for doing that. Your next teacher will thank you for doing that. Model that behavior so that parent learns these good behaviors. They learn this mature behavior, right? That we break those habits and bring in this mature behavior so that they realize this is what authority looks like. This is what mentorship looks like. It looks like Jesus, and this is how I want to model it for my child as well. I put a reading list on here for you. These are some of my favorites. I have a lot of other authors that I read. Again, my presentation is linked. If you're a principal, I love this, What Great Principals Do Differently. This is a really good one. Marching Off the Map, this one's almost getting a little outmoded. Poor Tim Elmore, he can't keep up with all the technology. But what I love is that he very much is talking about, with this new generation of children, how are we teaching them? That's less about parenting. The Most Excellent Way to Lead, Perry Noble, is completely biblically based. I love it. They're all biblical principles turned into leadership. The Case for Servant Leadership is where I get a lot of my leadership data. Kent is kind of the expert in servant leadership. You'll love his connections to Christ and to other religious leaders. And then The Heart of Leadership by Mark Miller, you might be familiar. That's kind of a narrative style of talking through leadership. But I would recommend that you find one of those books. Like I said, a big part of this talk for me is just helping you reset. Feel re-energized when you go back to your parents. How am I going to model Jesus a little bit better? How am I going to find some ways to compromise a little bit more? And how am I going to help them build great patterns so that when they leave my classroom, when they get to the next teacher, I've helped them establish good communication patterns. So if anybody has any questions and stuff, I encourage you to stay. Otherwise, it's 10 after 5, so I'm sure they're passing out something out there that you can go eat. Thank you again so much for your time. I really appreciate it.